Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fitton Center. If you are able, could you please stand for the presentation of the colors and the singing of the national anthem of the United States of America.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ready, cut, order, colors. Ready, cut, right, ace, carry, colors. Ready, cut, forward, arch.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was the Hamilton High School Navy Junior ROTC, led by Captain Allison. A big round of applause, thank you. And to Mr. Cy Wood from Butler Tech. Cy is a theater and voice teacher for Butler Tech and will also be starring in Secret Garden here at the Fitton Center later next month. Thank you very much, Cy, for that beautiful rendition. Can I also introduce you to our pre-performance musician here, Air National Guardsman, Airman First Class, Mr. Darren Nitke. If you're as fortunate as I, Darren comes in here often. We have 4 grand pianos in this building, and I love nothing else than to being played. And Darren comes in here when he's able and he's off time to come and play the piano. And there's no greater joy for us and the staff to be able to come out in the foyer and hear this wonderful music. So thank you for playing for us today. We certainly appreciate it, and for your service. Well, I feel like it was just a couple of weeks ago that I was standing up here saying goodbye to the 2015-2016 season, and here we are opening the 2016-2017 season. For those of you who are able to make it to our season launch event last month, we had an incredible turnout. We had well over 1,000 people turn up for that event. A great turnout and great interaction here at the Fitton Center. People mean everything to us. The fact we have people interacting, people coming to shows, coming to events like today, that is what we live and breathe, and we really appreciate that support. It has been fantastic for us. This is our very first celebrating Self of the Year. We have a wonderful lineup throughout the year full of some really interesting characters, both locally and nationally, to bring to the Fitness Center, because we certainly believe it's more than just about lunch and coming together. You can affect real change in just 1 hour, and we really wanted to bring people to you that would be able to do that for you, to engage with, to inspire, to amuse, to entertain, to really engage with the city here and the people here in Hamilton, and we really appreciate everybody involved. I'd like to give a big thanks to our friends at Fairfield Foodies, to Dee Mines, for the wonderful lunch that you're eating today. Thank you very much, Dee. We certainly appreciate it. And to our friends at Hillendale, the lovely dessert, which you're probably onto right now from our friends at Hillendale. It's fantastic. And to our series sponsor, the Journal News. We have some members from the Journal News here today. We really appreciate their support of this entire series. Thank you very much. And I can't go without saying thank you to the Ohio Arts Council, to Cincinnati Arts Wave, and of course to our own Hamilton Community Foundation for their ongoing support of everything we do here at the Fitness Center. I'm really excited about our guest tonight, not only for his background in service, but for his background here in Hamilton, which means a great deal to all of us as we try to inspire a new generation here in Hamilton. Many, many years of service given. The word hero is used a lot these days. We talk about sports figures and actors for the things that they do are heroic. Maybe used a little too often. That's not probably for me to say, but we have in our midst today a true American hero, and that's a very exciting thing for the service done in service of his nation. But with that, I know that we have many veterans here today currently serving and have served, and I would like to ask all veterans to stand for us to be recognized, please. Please don't be shy. Thank you very much for your service and to your families for their support and for those who were not able to return. We thank you. We thank you for your time and for your service. It's an important thing. I was discussing this with the General over dinner last night, talking about community and community service and what that does and how that builds. We ask a lot of our leaders, but maybe they're not the ones affecting change. We discussed a lot about Hamilton and how the changes have been here since the General grew up here as a kid. And I said that change has been affected by the community. That community service is a valued commodity here in Hamilton. It's respected, it's honored, it's encouraged. It's something we're all involved with and is seen as an absolute value to the community. And that is what the General has dedicated his life to in service of this country and of us all. But the reason I invited him here today is not just because of his actions and of his great career, but as I had mentioned earlier, that Hamilton is in a great flux, a great positive change, and we at the Fitness Center, as you've seen through our programming of the year, are trying to invite Hamiltonians back here. Now, you can't be a Broadway star and live in Hamilton. You can't run an army and live in Hamilton. You have to leave, and that's okay, but we're trying to bring those back to inspire a new generation to say there is nothing you can't achieve from growing up here in Hamilton, going to our fantastic school district here with the Hamilton School District and Baden, that you can't go on to great things. The things that has pleased me the most as the quickness of the word yes. How do I come back? How do I give back? How do I help that next generation to offer a helping hand, to inspire, to encourage? And that is something that has impressed me greatly as we've put this season together. So this gives me no greater pleasure to introduce you today to Lieutenant General Rick Lynch. It's all yours.
Forgive me, I'm allergic to podiums and PowerPoint slides. I want to start off with thanks. Thanks to Ian and the folks here at the Fitness Center for Creative Arts. I appreciate this opportunity to come back to my hometown and talk to folks here It's amazing what you've done with this fitness center. I mean, I remember when I left here in 1973 to go off to West Point, none of this existed, but to come back and see it now, it's amazing. And when Sarah and I travel the world and we see similar facilities, nothing is as good as what I'm seeing right here. So well done, Ian. Well done to you and your team, and to the chairman of the board, and thanks again for this opportunity. I want to congratulate personally the singer of the national anthem and the members of the color guard. That's the best I've seen, and I see lots of them, but that was magnificent. I do worry that people today are disrespecting our flag and our anthem. I don't understand that. Maybe it's because we as a nation take freedom for granted, because that's all we've ever known. They don't realize that over 1.2 million Americans have given their lives in defense of our freedoms. And right now we've got America's sons and daughters in places like Iraq and Afghanistan defending our freedoms and our way of life. All at the same time, people back here are disrespecting our flag and our national anthem, and I just don't understand. I pray for them. I hope that they see the way. They have to understand that the freedoms that they have weren't free, and somebody paid the cost. I also want to recognize the veterans myself. Less than 1% of the American public have served our nation in uniform, but we all enjoy the freedoms provided by those select few. We always have to acknowledge that. We have to have people continue to serve, like the members of the ROTC and our gentlemen from the Air National Guard. I mean, we have to continue to have people stand up and say, put me in, coach, because we're a nation at risk. There are people out there that hate us, they hate our way of life, and we got to be able to protect ourselves. I'm particularly honored to be with the World War II veterans. Dr. Smitter, thank you so much for being here. I went to high school with their son, Jeff, who's also now a cardiologist in Cincinnati, I guess. Sir, you're an inspiration to us all. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the greatest generation. God bless you. And it's so good to see you and your wife doing so well. God bless you. Round of applause for that, Schmidt. And then you got to acknowledge that we as a nation really made a mistake during the Vietnam era by not recognizing the service of those folks who fought for our nation's freedoms in Vietnam. I never pass up an opportunity to tell folks who served in Vietnam, thank you. See, now, when you travel the nation in uniform, people stop and generally tell you thank you for your service, but back then, when they came home, they didn't get that. So we're today blessed with May Turner to be in the audience, who's a Vietnam veteran. Anybody else who served in Vietnam as well, God bless you, thank you. And just know now, even though it's a little late now, we do indeed appreciate what you've done for our nation. And the last group that I want to acknowledge is military families. Sarah and I have been married for almost 33 years. We have 2 wonderful children, now 3 grandchildren. If you'd like to see pictures, I'll show you pictures after. A wonderful family. But what happens these days is we always recognize the veterans, but rarely do we recognize the veterans' families. You know, I had 4 years at war. While I was at war, Sarah was home taking care of our family and all the other military families where we were located. And that's happened in the history of our nation. There's always been family members who stayed home, kept the home fires burning, and made sure that that service member had a place to come back to. So if you're a military family member, I'd ask you to stand up and be recognized. Please stand up and be recognized. If your son, daughter, husband, wife served in the military, please stand up and be recognized. And a round of applause. God bless you. We know what you went through. Sarah and I moved 27 times in the 30 years that we were married while I was in the Army. Every time I went off to war, she stayed back through all the trials and tribulations, as you can imagine, while I was off in combat operations. So God bless the military family. And as you see service members these days out and about, thank them for their service, but hug their families and tell them thank you as well. I'm back here to tell you all thanks. You know, I'm born and raised here in Hamilton, Ohio, born in 1955. And my parents both worked at the paper mill, Champion. My dad worked on the cutters. He worked shift work, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. My mom also worked at Champion. The house that I first lived in, my dad lived in for the duration of his life in Brookwood subdivision, you know. Went to Cleveland Elementary School. I still remember my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Thurn. Mrs. Junkin, who was my second grade teacher, is a friend with me on Facebook, you know. So my roots in Cleveland are important to me. I went off to Wilson Junior High School. I remember vividly Ezekiel Gibson, the vice principal. primarily for one event. I decided it'd be a good idea out at lunchtime one day in the back of the school to throw Ross Tilley's pencils. Ross Tilley had a pocket protector. I don't know why he wore a pocket protector, but I didn't like it at the time. So I thought it'd be pretty cool for me to grab his pencils and throw it across the parking lot. The vice principal didn't think it was that cool, right? So I remember vividly being called into his office, asked to look out the window, asked to reach down and grab my ankles, and then 3 swats later, I never threw pencils again, right? Ezekiel Gibson did that, and then when they called home and told my dad what I'd done at school, it was the worst event time I got home. And there's a moral to that story, by the way. We worry today about bullies in the playgrounds, and there's a way to deal with that, that we tend not to because we want to be kind and gentle. I don't understand. And then I went off to Hamilton Taft High School, graduated from there in 1973. Gary Mazingo was our math teacher. Bob Weber's in the back. He sat behind me in math, but Gary Mazingo, we referred to him as Ringo Mazingo because he played the guitar in the class. But he really taught me the importance of algebra and calculus and trigonometry and those kinds of things. He made a mark in my life from an engineering perspective. And then I was blessed with a lady in my life named Eileen Lowell. And I don't know if any of you know Miss Lowell, but there I was in 1972, thinking that I probably needed to go to college, but I knew that my parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I mean, they both worked at Champion, and you know what it was like working at Champion. I mean, potato soup was really the highlight of the week. I got my first job at the age of 13, not because I wanted to get a job, but because we as a family needed the money. Well, that's what I did. So I walked in to see Eileen Lowell in 1972, and I said, ma'am, I think that I'm supposed to go to college, but I got no idea how to do that because my parents have no money. I said, do I have any options? Eileen said, well, you got these things called military academies. I said, really? I said, well, how much do they cost? She says, nothing. They pay you to go. Sounded pretty cool to me, right? So I applied to West Point and Annapolis, Annapolis being the Naval Academy, West Point being the Army's academy. I got my acceptance to West Point on a Monday, my Annapolis acceptance on the very next day, Tuesday. The only reason I went to West Point is because I got the acceptance the day before. I tell people the postman truly determined my fate, So if it wasn't for Eileen Lowell offering up that opportunity, none of this that's happened since then would have happened. So those people in my life at Hamilton Taft made such a difference in my life, and we have to acknowledge that all the time. I remember vividly a lady named Joy Johnson who gave me a job at a place called Cary Cottage out in Ross. And oh, by the way, she became my biggest advocate and helped me get an appointment to the military academy. I mean, those kinds of people were right here in Hamilton, Ohio, and did I lose it? Sarah and I love both kinds of music, both country and Western, right? And we had the privilege not long ago here in Merle Haggard in concert prior to his death. And he sang one of my favorite songs, The Roots of My Raisin, right? So I tell people all the time, the roots of my raisin run deep. It all started right here in Hamilton, Ohio. And yes, I was blessed to go to the academy, and yes, I was blessed to serve our nation in uniform for 35 years. But without the roots that started right here in Hamilton, Ohio, none of that would happen. And I'm sure as you look across your life and the lives of the people that you're touching right now, you have similar stories. My favorite book is a book entitled The Life God Rewards by Bruce Wilkinson. And in it, the author says, God really doesn't care how many stars you wear or how much money you make. He cares about how many people you touch. So all of us every day ought to be focused on touching lives and making a difference. I know here in Hamilton that happened to me in spades. And I'm so grateful for my time here in Hamilton. And I come back every chance I get. My mom passed in 2009 when I was a 3-star general at Fort Hood, Texas. So we came back for her funeral and her celebration of life. And then I committed to call my dad every day since 2009 because he was by himself. He lived in my house. I refused to move. I'd call him every day. I come visit him every 3 months. In June, unfortunately, Dad passed at the age of 89. But I commit to continue to come back to Hamilton and help however I can. So again, thanks for this opportunity. What Sarah and I do is we travel the nation really with 3 of our passions. The first is support for our wounded warriors. I mean, this is a difficult thing that we've been going through since 9/11. just like it was difficult in World War II in Korea and Vietnam. Again, I had 4 years in combat as a result of 9/11 in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Kosovo and places like that. When I commanded 5,000 soldiers in Iraq as part of the surge, and we turned that place around when President Bush said, let's put more soldiers in Iraq, turn that place around. We had the worst part of the area. 153 soldiers died on the battlefield on a place I placed them. I got to live with that the rest of my life. 800 more came back in pieces, losing arms or legs or eyesight or having invisible wounds. So Sarah and I spent a lot of time helping wounded warriors. We're on the board for the Gary Sinise Foundation. Have you heard the name Gary Sinise? People know him as a great actor. We know him as a great humanitarian. Most of the money that started the foundation was Gary Sinise's personal money. He never served a day himself, but he had family members who served. He's best known for his role in Forrest Gump. He was Lieutenant Dan. He started the Lieutenant Dan Band to play around the nation to lift the morale of our service members and their families. He's an amazing human being, and the Gary Sinise Foundation does a lot for our wounded warriors and their families. So if you're interested in supporting wounded warriors, please talk to me about that, because it's so darn important. And oh, by the way, we're still a nation at risk, and there's more wounded warriors yet to come. So be conscious of that. Sarah and I spend a lot of time talking about leadership, because the issue our nation is having today is lousy leadership at all levels, right? At all levels. People say, well, look at those people in Washington, D.C. Okay, well, yeah, they got problems, but we got problems right here too, in Hamilton and in Texas, wherever it might be. So we've invested time and energy into talking about leadership and leader development. I'd like to share some of my thoughts on that with you. When I retired from the military, I was approached and people said, well, we want to write your memoirs. We want to publish your memoirs. And I said, I don't want to do that. Because to me, if you publish your memoirs, it looks like it's all about you. It was never all about me. So what I did write is a book about adaptive leadership entitled Adapt or Die, and I have some back there if you'd like a copy on your way out. They're back there available for sale. So we use that book as a platform to make presentations on leadership, and I'd like to talk to you about that. And then we use a platform to share the word. You know, my new book is entitled Work Hard, Pray Hard, The Power of Faith in Action. I give all glory to God and all thanks to my family, so I made it a point to write the book to talk about how my personal relationship with God gets me through difficult times. That book will come out in April, and if you'd like a copy of that book, just make sure Ian and his team have your mailing address, and I'll send you a free copy of the book when the book gets released come next April. But it's important to Sarah and I to continue to share the word, just like God asked us to do. Today I'm going to focus on the second of those three things, and that's leadership. Who here is a leader? Who's a leader? Everybody should raise their hand, because we're all leaders. We're leaders in our families, we're in our churches, in our communities, in our corporation, in our nonprofits, whatever it might be. So the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that we're all leaders. Who here is a good leader? Well, you notice I didn't raise my hand either, right? I'm a work in progress. You know, I had the privilege of leading at all levels. In the United States Army, your first leadership position is really a platoon leader. I started that in 1977 with 30 people in my platoon. Then I became a company commander of 150 people, then a battalion commander of 450, and a brigade commander of 2,500, a division commander of 25,000, a corps commander of 65,000, and the last thing I ran for the Army is all the installations with a workforce of 120,000. So I know something about leadership because I had the opportunity to lead, but I still make mistakes. I'm still growing as a leader. I'm trying to do better all the time to improve my leadership skills. There's a book entitled That Used to Be Us by a gentleman named Thomas Friedman. If you haven't read that book, I recommend that to your personal library. In the book, Thomas Friedman says, this is the way our nation used to be, this is the way our nation is, and this is the way our nation could be, and the difference is leadership. Concerned, caring, compassionate leadership of people who are going to do the right things for the right reasons. And I argue that we as a nation have lost our way. We've lost our way primarily because of lousy leaders. And again, I'm not making a political statement. I'm not talking about this administration or this particular state government. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we collectively, we've lost our way. We got to focus on being better leaders. God tells us in 2 Chronicles 7:14, he tells us that if my people, who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, and I will hear them from heaven and I will heal their land. So God tells us what we're supposed to do, and to me, it's all about leadership. It's lifestyle evangelism, it's being the best leader you can be, and then sharing the word with other folks. So let me give you some insights on what I think about leadership, and take it for what it's worth, because I don't pretend to be the expert in leadership. There are a lot of books out there by leaders. There are a lot of books out there about leadership written by folks who've never led. You know, what I try to do is use my experience in the Army, and since I've left the Army, and talk about specific aspects of leadership. First off, you got to ask yourself, what is the most important piece of furniture in your house? In your mind, what do you think that is in your home? All the pieces of furniture, what do you think? You know, when I do this, I get lots of responses. I get the bed, because I spend a lot of time in the bed. General, I like that. I get the dining room table. That's where the dinner, we have kitchen, that's where we have family meals. I get the TV, because that's where I like to watch videos and play my games and all that stuff. I believe it's the mirror. And I believe every day you ought to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, how you doing? Am I being the best person that I can be? Am I being the best husband, the wife, the father, the mother, the chairman, the director that I can be? And if not, then I believe you ought to take actions to fix that. So let me give you some ideas on things you might want to ask yourself the next time you look in the mirror. And it breaks down into 3 basic groups: attitude, engagement, and time management. And I break these down in my book in 9 leadership principles. The first principle that comes under the rubric of attitude is focus on opportunities, not obstacles. Who here has ever worked for a negative person or around a negative person? Has ever had that circumstance? Who here enjoyed that, right? I mean, it's fraught with failure, it really is. So if the leader's always down, and the leader's always frustrated and upset and concerned, everybody around them is the same way. So as a leader, you got to be upbeat and positive. You got to focus on opportunities, not obstacles. And ask yourself how you're doing with that. Every day, life throws you a curveball. Every day, there's something going to happen that you didn't expect. That's the nature of this thing called life, right? Things are going to happen that you did not expect. And you got to ask yourself how you're going to respond. Because in every time there's something that happened, you can focus on the opportunity there and not the obstacle. And I'll give you an example. President Bush, 43, I mean, Sarah and I have been blessed to be around both Bush 41 and Bush 43 and their families. And I'm proud of our relationship. I'm proud of the fact that we know him. I'm proud of what he did for our country, Bush 43. But in the 2006 timeframe, he finally listened to us military senior leaders when we told him that we didn't have enough troops in Iraq to make a difference. We were really fighting a war without sufficient assets. So he decided to surge troops into Iraq. You all remember that? You know? Conscious decision to do the right thing for our nation, regardless of what the polls say. You know, as a leader in the military and today, I ask 3 questions. Are we doing the right things, number 1? Are we doing things right, number 2? And what are we missing? And President Bush looked at it and said, regardless of what the polls say, regardless of what my counselors are telling me, the military leaders are saying we need additional troops, so we're going to surge forces into Iraq. So I'm sitting there at Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a division level commander, 25,000 soldiers. And we had a plan to go into northern Iraq in 6 months, because that was the mission at hand. Northern Iraq was the most peaceful part of Iraq. You know, it was relatively stable. We'd all been there before. We've already done a reconnaissance. Everything's fine. We had a detailed training plan to get us there in 6 months. One day I've got all my leaders assembled, and I get a call from the leadership of the Army. And the Chief Staff of the Army says, Rick, change of mission. And in the military, that just tells you something's fixing to happen, right? Change of mission. He said, the President decided to surge troops into Iraq, so we're going to surge your division. And you're no longer going to northern Iraq, the most peaceful part of Iraq. You're going to go into southern Iraq, the worst part of Iraq. It was called the Triangle of Death. But we hadn't had soldiers there, but you got to take your soldiers there. I said, sir, Roger, I'm making note. Northern Iraq to southern Iraq, got it. And he says, and you got to be there in 6 weeks. Think about that. Even if you're not a military person, if you're going into a hostile environment and you thought you had 6 months to prepare, but now you only got 6 weeks to prepare, that's a significant change, right? So I say, Roger, and I write down 6 weeks. Put down the phone. All my leaders are assembled outside the office, so it's a perfect opportunity to tell them about what's fixing to happen. I put down the phone. What's the first thing you think I did? I dropped to my knees to pray and asked God for strength, courage, and wisdom to do the thing that was fixing to confront us. And then I made a conscious decision to focus on the opportunity, not the obstacle. If I'd have came out with all my assembled leaders and said, can you believe what those folks in Washington are doing? Can you believe that they really want us to go into the worst part of Iraq and be there in 6 weeks? What would have happened? We never would have made it, right? Everybody would have been like a balloon that got deflated. Everybody would have said, you're right, General, we can't get there from here. What the heck are they talking about? I decided not to do that. I decided to come out and say, hey, we got this opportunity. Thank God that the President of the United States has finally decided to give us sufficient assets to turn Iraq around. We got this opportunity. And these amazing soldiers, they figured it out. They did. They took that area that was called the Triangle of Death, and 15 months later it became the Triangle of Life. Those amazing soldiers did that. I use that as an example of focusing on opportunities, not obstacles. Another one is, so I'm running all the Army installations, and that's 163 installations with a workforce of 120,000 people. And my annual budget was $20 billion a year. That's significant change, right? $20 billion a year. I get called in the Chief Staff of the Army's office early in my tenure, and he says, Rick, change of mission. Something's going to happen. He says, based on budget cuts and sequestration, we've taken a significant cut in the Army's budget. So your budget is no longer $20 billion a year, it's $15 billion a year. But you got to provide our soldiers and their families a quality of life commensurate with their quality of service. So as you think about circumstances, a guy named Clausewitz wrote a book entitled On War. He talks about ends, ways, and means. So if your end remains the same, quality of life, commensurate with quality of service, and your means are significantly reduced, what do you have to do? You got to change your ways, right? So we had to look for efficiencies. I walked out of that phone conversation. I told the entire organization, we got an opportunity. We're going to be able to do less better. We're going to focus on efficiencies and make a difference. So ask yourself that tonight. Even in your daily walk of life, when circumstances come your way, do you make it an opportunity or do you allow it to become an obstacle? It makes all the difference in the world. The second thing I like to talk about under attitude is celebrate diversity. Celebrate diversity. There are indeed people out there of all walks of life that are smarter than you are, right? Has anybody ever worked for somebody who thought they were the smartest person in the room all the time? That's no fun either, right? That's no fun either. So you're always trying to figure out, what are my shortfalls? And in my book, I talk about all my shortcomings, and I got a lot of them. Just ask my wife, and she'll tell you. But at least I acknowledge that there are things that I don't do very well. So what you do is you surround yourself by people not like you that can accommodate your shortfalls, right? So for example, there's this thing called social media. Have you ever heard about social media? I guess it's all the rage because everybody's using it all the time. So it's Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And I don't particularly like to do that stuff. To me, it's a nightmare scenario to spend a lot of time in front of a computer, because that's not leading. You can't lead from the computer. Leadership is a contact sport. But if you want to get the word out, you got to use social media. So inside of my inner circle, from the time I became a general officer 10 years prior to my retirement to today, I always had people not like me around me that embraced this idea of social media and could use it to communicate. What do you think that person looked like? Was it a 60-year-old bald white guy like me? I'm going to hire somebody like me to do social media. No, that dog don't hunt either. What do you think that person looked like? They were young, right? They were vibrant. They were excited. They were attached to their devices, right? You see it all the time now. I mean, I am worried when I go out to restaurants with Sarah and we see families sitting around a table and everybody's got their device in their hand, right? It's like they're texting each other. I don't understand. We've lost the ability to communicate. But if you celebrate diversity, acknowledge your weaknesses, and get people around you that are going to compensate for your weaknesses, will make all the difference in the world. This next block that I'm going to talk about, a lot of people don't like, but I believe it in my heart and soul. If you want to be an effective leader, you got to love those people entrusted to your care like you love your own children. Think about that. Love those people entrusted to your care like you love your own children. You wouldn't let your children go off and do stupid stuff. You wouldn't let them go, be on websites they shouldn't be on, do things that are unsafe, not do the things you know they're supposed to do. So why do you allow those people entrusted to your care to do things you know they shouldn't do? So I argue that you got to ask intrusive questions. You got to make sure that those people entrusted to your care are truly taken care of. What's the difference between a manager and a leader? Have you ever thought about that? I get that question all the time. See, I argue that the manager only cares about the people 8 hours a day. Did the person show up at work on time? Did they leave on time? Did they perform the duties they were supposed to during that 8-hour period of time? So, for example, Champion International. Did anybody work at Champion at some point in time? I mean, Dad worked there. He operated the same cutter for 30 years, right? But he could care less about Champion because he didn't think Champion cared about him. Champion wanted him to get to work on time and leave on time, all that stuff. That's managers. Leaders care about their people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just like you care about your own children. So you got to ask intrusive questions. How's your family? If you're a leader, you got to ask those kinds of questions. The issue is when they say, man, I'm glad you asked because my family's struggling, my parents are aged and ill, my kids aren't doing well in school, I'm having a problem making the car payment. Once you ask that question, then there's an expectation you're going to do something about it. Don't just ask the question to be asking a question. If you're going to ask the question and they give you an answer, then they expect you to do something about it. What happens if they're convinced that you truly care? Sarah's taught me so much over the years. I give all credit to her for whatever successes I've had, and I talk about that in the book. But she taught me the phrase, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. Think about that, right? So if you're in a situation where you've got people that work with you, around you, and for you, and they know you truly care, if something bad happens, they're going to work harder because they don't want to let you down because they know you truly care. If you just pretend to care or say I care, but you don't really care, are they going to work harder when circumstances confront them? Of course not. They're just going to say, okay, whatever. So think about that. I use the phrase in my book, be demanding, but not demeaning. Has anybody ever worked for a demeaning boss? Somebody that yells and screams and berates you and belittles you and makes you feel lousy? Have you ever had that circumstance? I mean, most of us have. I have. I talk about it there's a whole chapter in my book, talk about learning from lousy leaders, right? Because you can learn a lot from a lousy leader. When that person was demeaning to you, did you want to work hard for that person? Of course not. You didn't even want to be around that person. But leaders have to continually raise the high bar. They got to be demanding. If we accomplish this, let's accomplish that. If we accomplish that, now let's accomplish this. But remember this. It applies here at the Fitness Center, and it applies everywhere in the world that Sarah and I get a chance to talk to. Vision without resources is hallucination. Think about that. I mean, if you're the leader and you got this great vision, let's do this, gang, but you don't provide the resources, it ain't going to happen because you didn't provide the resources, and they're going to see it to be a pretty silly operation. So think about that. When you look in the mirror tonight, ask yourself, are you demanding or are you demeaning? In your relationship with your children, with your grandchildren, with your colleagues, with your bosses, how are you? And if you are demeaning, you got to walk away from that. God doesn't want you to be demeaning. The last group I talk about in the book that I think is appropriate for leadership is time management. Who here is a good time manager? Well, everybody should be. I mean, you should be. You should be a great time manager if you're going to be an effective leader. I studied at West Point. One of the things they taught you is time management. At West Point, they tell you, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. I mean, that's why today, I showed up about 10:15 for a 10:30 engagement because it's my nature. And I'm the guy that says, if you're supposed to start a meeting at 1 o'clock and I'm not there by 1:07, I want everybody to leave because I don't want people to waste their time waiting on me. I got unavoidably detained. And I'm the guy that says, we're going to have a 1-hour meeting and it's going to start at 1. So it's going to start at 1, and at 2, I'm going to get up and walk out. because people's time is important. So if you're not a good time manager, you got to study time management. And today with that thing called a computer, all you got to do is Google time management, and it'll probably run you to the Franklin Covey website, and that's the one I study and advocate all the time in terms of how you manage your time. Why is time management important to be an effective leader? I argue because it's work-life balance. See? You know, if you're the leader that just works all the time, and you make everybody work all the time, and you make them sacrifice their families for the performance of your objectives, you are wrong. But if you know how to manage your time and their time, you can do it all. You can achieve a work-life balance. You all believe that? See, a lot of folks don't buy that. They say, oh, there's no way. They say, here's the deal, General. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work real hard today, but don't worry, I'm going to play hard tomorrow. I'm going to work hard today, but I'll go see the kids' softball game tomorrow. I'm going to work hard today, but I'll call my parents and tell them that I love them tomorrow. What's the problem with that logic? There's no guarantees you got tomorrow. God never promised you tomorrow. He only promised you today. That's why it's called the present, right? That's what you got right here, right now, and you got to acknowledge that. So how are you using this time that you have right now is important. So here's what happened to me at Fort Hood, Texas. You know, Sarah's from Killeen, Texas. You know, the best thing that ever happened to me in my life was when I met Sarah in 1982, and she agreed to marry me. It was pretty difficult, by the way. Her dad retired as a master sergeant in the United States Army. Her mom was also a Sergeant E5 in the Army in World War II. Her dad served in World War II and Korea. Won a Silver Star on the field of battle in Korea. Was offered a battlefield commission. But before he died, he told Sarah, whatever you do, don't marry a GI. So man, that was an uphill climb. So I was a dashing young captain. I know that might be hard to believe, but I was. Bob can tell you, I did have hair in high school. I did. And I kept the hair for a little bit after high school, not much longer. But after a while, the hair went away. But in 1982, in July or so, I'm registering my softball team. And Sarah is the director of Parks and Recreation for a city called Killeen, Texas, right outside of Fort Hood. And that particular day, her administrative assistant wasn't there, so she had to take down all my personal information as I registered my softball team. And since she got all that personal information, she's just started calling me every day, begging me to take her out. You know, I know how far she can throw things, so I always make it before I get make sure I get out of range. Does anybody believe that? It cost me $690 to buy enough yellow roses to convince her to go out with me in July of 1982. But it was worth every dime, right? It was worth every dime. In Killeen, Texas, most important thing that happened to me. So Killeen is right outside of Fort Hood. That's the largest installation in the free world. It's right in central Texas. Sarah and I live by Fort Hood now. I was there as a captain, as a lieutenant colonel, as a colonel, as a one-star general, and as a three-star general. So I knew Fort Hood pretty good. And when I get back to Fort Hood, as the Corps commander, the guy in charge of 65,000 soldiers, I'm out MBWAing. Does anybody know what MBWAing is? Yeah, if you like leadership books, you ought to read Colin Powell's books. I mean, he's a magnificent human being. He's an amazing person. And he's written 2 great books about leadership, but he coined the phrase MBWA, managed by walking around. You know, because leadership is a contact sport. You got to get out and about. I mean, there are people who believe that you're leading if you're typing an email. Emails aren't leading, right? Email is typing and sending. You got to get out and about. So I practiced that my entire career. So as a 3-star general, I'm walking on the streets of Fort Hood, Texas, and a military spouse stops me with tears in her eyes. And she looks me in my eyes. She says, "You generals are lying to us." I said, "Ma'am, I don't understand." She said, "You generals are lying to us. You say you're bringing our husbands home between deployments. My husband has been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. He's back now at Fort Hood, Texas. But every night he comes home after the kids go to sleep. He's always working on weekends. And this thing you call family time, General, 3 o'clock on Thursdays, is a figment of your imagination, because he's not coming home at 3 o'clock on Thursday." She finally just told me, "Just keep him." because all you're doing is teasing the family. So I went home, and first thing I did is what? I prayed. I asked God for guidance on how to deal with that circumstance. Sarah and I talked about it at length. And the next morning, I declared Fort Hood, Texas, to be the family first corps. I demanded that everybody be home for dinner by 6, which means they had to leave work at 5 so they could be home for dinner by 6. Why do you think that was important? Yeah, I argue that the family forms and functions around the dinner table. You know, when I was growing up, when Dad was home, he wasn't working the 3 to 11 shift. You know, we sat around the dinner table and we talked about school. We talked about what went on that day. I had to report my grades. You know, my dad had a 7th grade education. He figured that's all he needed, right? Because he went to work at Champion right away after World War II. He just stayed right there. But if I didn't come home with all A's, there was hell to pay. Because he was demanding that standard. He was demanding that standard. And oh, by the way, the dinner table was when I had to report out. How'd I do in school that day? Sometimes it was a good conversation. Sometimes it wasn't such a good conversation. Their son Jeff was a valedictorian of our class. I wasn't, just so you know. I wasn't. I did okay. So the family had to form and function around the dinner table at 6 o'clock, so everybody had to be home for dinner. Everybody left at 3 o'clock on Thursdays. Why was that important? Additional family time. There's a day where the service member could go to the football practice, go to the play practice, be there to pick the kids up when they get off the school bus. That's way cool. That's family time. Everybody had to do that. And nobody could work on weekends without my personal approval. Now, when you got a corps of 65,000 soldiers, there's a lot of leaders there. That's a lot of people. So I got all the leaders together. I said, if you can't figure out your training plan to avoid working on the weekends, come see me, and I'll help you with your training plan. In 2 years as a commander, how many people you think came to me and said, General, I just can't figure this out. Can you show me how to do this? No, nobody did. So we didn't work on weekends. So do you think the Corps, this is right in the middle of combat, by the way, we were preparing soldiers to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think the Corps was better prepared for combat or less prepared for combat? Better prepared. All indicators they were better prepared. Our suicide rate went down. Even though Fort Hood was the largest installation in the world, we had the lowest suicide rate. Domestic violence incidents went down. Divorce rates went down. The safety record went up. Fort Hood had never been more than 30 days without a traffic fatality. We went 245 days without a traffic fatality. And I argue it's because we placed family first. I tell you that story that it can be done. When people say, well, General, we're just too busy. We can't do work-life balance. I feel sorry for them. I really do. Because it's really all about the family. Now, I give all glory to God and all thanks to my family for all the great things that have come my way, but we dedicated time for the family. I mean, I lived the family time. At 3 o'clock on Thursdays, I went home. I lived to be home for dinner by 6 o'clock, regardless of what rank I was. Now, when the kids went to bed, there's probably time to do more work. I got all that. I had to get work done, but we made an important effort to focus on the family. And I argue that you should do that as well. It makes all the difference in the world. Because if you're the leader and you demonstrate work-life balance, what happens? Everybody else does as well, right? Because you showed them what right looks like. You're a lifestyle evangelist. So every Wednesday at Fort Hood, Texas, every new arrival would come to Fort Hood's main ballroom. It was always 500 soldiers and their families. And I talked to them. And Sarah and I met them individually. We talked about, here's my expectations of you, and here's your expectations of me. And I told them about my policies. I said, if it's not working in your outfit, let me know. So one day, my secretary comes in before I'm out MBWAing, and General, you got Private Smith on the phone. Normally, the general doesn't get the call from the private, right? But in today's environment with these youngsters, they're not afraid to call the general. So Private Smith calls me and says, General, I just got to Fort Hood 2 weeks ago, and I heard about all your policies. Was that thing you call family time a policy or recommendation? Because it's not happening in my company. I said, well, thank you, Private Smith. I appreciate that. I put down the phone. What do you think I did next? Yeah, I didn't need to pray. I had a trip I had to go on, right? I had to go find that young captain, that company commander, and talk about, who's the Corps commander and what policies do I have and why aren't you enforcing the policies? So this young captain said, well, General, it's like this. He says, I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So I got no place to go at 3 o'clock on Thursdays. So I just tell everybody to leave and I stay here and work. Does that work? Again, that dog don't hunt either, right? If you're the leader, you got to demonstrate. You got to get in your car and leave. And then, oh, by the way, if you need to do work at home, then you do work at home, whatever. So it's all about work-life balance. And one of my leadership principles is have fun. Has anybody ever worked for a boss that didn't have fun? That sucks. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah. I promise I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I've done a great job on my language since I left the military. I really have. You should have heard me before. Anyway. Yeah, if you're a leader, you want to demonstrate it's okay to have fun. You have to have events where you can have fun. You can work, but you can play. You can do it all at the same time, and I believe that. So if you're interested in those 9 principles or more about my ideas or more stories about what I did, they're all in my book, Adapt or Die, Battle-Tested Principles for Leaders. I've signed every copy that I brought. I brought 52 copies. If you'd like a copy, they're $15. Just pay Sarah. Or if you'd like me to personalize it, I'm happy to do that before I leave. And then let me get to my final topic. Do I still have time? I do? Okay. So we are indeed a nation at risk. If you don't believe that, you're not paying attention. There are people out there that hate us. We have external threats like Russia. I mean, the first half of my career, I was fighting the Soviet Union. We were actually in full to Germany when the wall came tumbling down. But the hatred the people of Russia have for us is still there. And now Putin is strutting his stuff. And we're letting him get away with it. He invaded Ukraine. He's now in Syria. I mean, he's the bully on the block. And we all know how you deal with bullies. You take him to Ezekiel Gibson's office and give him swats. No, that won't work with Putin. Maybe it'll work. Maybe we ought to try that. Anyway, you just got to stand up to him. I worry about Iran. A lot of the soldiers who died under my command died based on Iranian influence because they hate us and they hate our way of life. They do. And now we're allowing them to develop nuclear weapons? Go figure. What about North Korea that's already got a nuclear weapon and is developing ballistic missiles that'll reach the continental United States? So we're a nation at risk from external threats, but my biggest concern is we're a nation at risk from internal threats, right? Domestic terrorism. There are terrorists here in Hamilton, Ohio. And if you don't believe that's true, you're unbelievably naive, right? Because they don't like what's going on. They may not be part of ISIS, but they're terrorists nonetheless. Domestic terrorism, and you got to be concerned about that. It's a shame, in my mind, that we as Americans have to carry weapons on our own soil using the concealed handgun laws that are pertinent across the nation. You know, Sarah and I have our concealed handgun license in the state of Texas. It's a shame that we have to do that, but that's where we are, because we're a nation at risk with domestic terrorism. We're a nation at risk because of divisive people. There are people who every day wake up and say, how can I drive a wedge between elements of our society? I mean, we used to identify ourselves as Americans. You'd stop somebody on the street, what are you? I'm an American. Now it's I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a homosexual, I'm a heterosexual, whatever it might be. We've lost our identity, but unfortunately, there are people trying to drive a wedge between elements of our society. And we can't let that happen. We got to be Americans. We got to do what's right for America first. And then my biggest concern about internal threats is a lack of respect for law enforcement personnel. Man, I can't imagine how we got to where we are. I was taught growing up, and you were as well, when a police officer stops you, it's yes, sir, no, sir, no excuse, sir, what can I do? You pay respect to that law enforcement personnel. Now we don't. And oh, by the way, the media captures it and makes it look like it's fun to disrespect our law enforcement personnel. And they're volunteering to serve every day, by the way, just like the U.S. military. They're putting themselves at risk every day. So you have to acknowledge we're a nation at risk. But I learned early in my time as a general officer, you can't roll up your sleeves while you're wringing your hands. Think about that. I mean, if you're part of the group of Americans, you just want to complain all the time. Can you believe this? Can you believe that? What are we going to do? Woe is me. You're not part of the solution. The very fact that you're here today to listen to a speaker like me and other speakers shows me you care and you want to be part of the solution. So I just want to make sure that we're all acknowledging that it can be done. Who here is worried about the upcoming presidential elections? Well, you ought to be. I mean, I don't know how we got to where we are. Sarah and I supported Rick Perry from the great state of Texas, and then he fell out. And then Mike Huckabee from Arkansas, he fell out. When Jeb Bush talked about the 30 flag officers on his team, I was one of those flag officers, because all three of those gentlemen were strong Christian men who cared about America. For whatever reason, in our process, they fell by the wayside, and now you got the options that you have. And we all got to vote our conscience. We got to vote for where we think is going to do best for America, because you're going to have a choice of two is what it looks like right now. But don't worry, because regardless who the president is, he's not going to fix our nation's problems. We are, right here in the community. If everybody across the nation would accept the fact that it's their job to do the right things for the right reasons, it'll work out. Remember, we are a democracy. Everybody in the National Capital Region works for us. We place them there, and we can take them out. We have to acknowledge that, right? But at the end of the day, it ain't about what's going on in Washington. My last job in the Army, I had an office in the Pentagon, and I spent almost once a week in the halls of Congress talking to members of Congress who are trying to do the right thing for their party, not for our nation, but for their party. So they're not going to solve the problems up here. We're going to solve it right here. And oh, by the way, we as Americans are going to make sure that they know we're dissatisfied with their performance. But if you go back to what I said before, be the best leader you can be. Work every day to touch lives and make a difference. Every night, look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I doing? Am I being the best I can be? And if not, take corrective action, then we'll be okay. And as God says, if we humble ourselves, that's a big problem across the nation these days. Folks who aren't humble. Tim McGraw did that song, Humble and Kind. Have you heard that song? Country and Western. We all ought to live by that song, Humble and Kind. If we will humble ourselves, pray and seek his face, and turn from our wicked ways. Who here is free of sin? Nobody, to include me. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God. We have to acknowledge that. We always have to try to do better. But if we do that, turn from our wicked ways, then God promises us that he will hear us from heaven and heal the land. So I just want you to be upbeat, positive. No, it's going to be okay, because we're going to make it okay. And if you'd like to talk to me more about it, either this afternoon or some other time, please take one of my cards and feel free to reach out to me so we can talk about it some more, because we have a vested interest in getting our nation back on track. So two things. If you'd like a book signed and you just want to pay the money because you got to get somewhere else, give Sarah the money and then leave. If you don't have the money, just take the book anyway and mail me a check. If you want me to personalize it to you or somebody that you love, I'm happy to stick around and do that. The second book, Work Hard, Pray Hard, The Power of Faith in Action, I'm so proud of. Once you finish writing a book, is anybody in the book business? Once you finish writing a book, it's a 6-month birthing process. Even though you've written the book, it takes 6 months to promote the book and edit the book and get the right cover and all that stuff. So the book will be released on April the 11th, coincidental with Easter. But if you'd like a free copy of that book, please just give Ian and his team your address, mailing address, and I'll make sure when the book comes out, a copy will be mailed to you personally. So I'll leave you with this. I love Hamilton, Ohio. I am what I am because of Hamilton, Ohio. Not just my parents, but for the things that happened to me while I was here in Hamilton, Ohio. As I come back now, almost 43 years later, I'm so impressed with the changes in our community. I never would have predicted that there'd be something like the Fenton Center for Creative Arts here in Hamilton, Ohio. We're staying at the Courtyard Marriott, first class. I remember back when it was the Hamiltonian, or something that looked like a hotel but wasn't really a hotel. Remember that when we were growing up? Anyway, I am proud of what's happened in our community. I'm proud of the change that you made, and I attribute it all to you. Dedicated, loyal citizens. Take care, and God bless.
Lieutenant General Rick Lynch, Hamilton's own. Thank you very much, General. Thank you for coming back to Hamilton, and more importantly, giving back to this city. We all appreciate it, and I know the city does. It means a great deal to us. So thank you, and to Sarah for your time here. The General is sticking around. There'll be an opportunity to meet him, sign some bookings, and get some photographs. Really appreciate that. Thank you again to General Lynch and the family, and we'll see you here at the Fitton Center again very soon. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.